right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. The conversation continues even during the break. It's youth and taxes. We are linking it to the goodies from billions in the US by the Ruto trip. And also, but you wanted to mention something, Nathaniel, in response to what Philip was saying before I bring in Biko.
Yes. So first of all, if you look at what the president has been able to do even in the United States as we speak, when he arrived, he went to address an audience at the Jimmy Carter Presidential Library, and he gave a very wonderful speech in his first day in the U.S. Later on, we saw him speaking about the issue of debt that we are discussing here. He was very vocal about it. When he was addressing the Black Congressional Caucus, he asked the MPs in the U.S. Congress to consider putting legislation forward on the issue of the debt that is advanced to African countries and especially Kenya. And he was urging them to consider putting the legislative proposal in the format of a single-digit interest rate for every money we borrow from multilateral institutions. This is very key because Kenya and many other African countries are accessing international financial resources at double digits, maybe 12%, when other countries are accessing the same resources at a single digit, maybe 2%, 3%. So this the president clearly put forward. And this has a direct relationship with how the Kenyan taxes are being done, because we have to pay our taxes. And we have to pay even the obligations, the debt that we have accumulated from the previous regimes. The second point I wanted to make that Philip has raised consistently, it is not an issue of looking east or west. It is an issue of looking at Kenya's interest. So, for example, if you're having a conversation with the Chinese, for example, or Russia, or any other geopolitical power, it is not about Kenya has now adopted a look east or west policy. We are supposed to look at our own interest as a country. So in these conversations, and these are very, very tricky conversations when you are engaging other big players in the world stage, you have to be, first of all, you have to pick the agendas, the topic for discussion, because it has to be mutual. It has to be mutual interest when you're discussing with these superpowers. So the president has been able to navigate this very carefully in all the conversation we've seen him engaging in. So I wanted to just urge Philip that it is not as simple as ABCD as he's looking at it, because the moment you're in that seat, the responsibilities are much higher. Okay. The information the president has in terms of this trip, it is well prepared in advance. He is trying to undermine the significance of the state visit that has taken a place for a very long time, and we are supposed to appreciate. For example, we've only dwelled on one piece of project. You've seen the 23 billion that has been allocated to the affordable housing. That's a very big quantum leap in terms of the financing of the affordable housing.
But there's also housing levy being taxed here.
There is a housing levy that is being taxed.
So we don't necessarily need this, because we are able to build on it.
It is going to fill into the deficit, because remember the ambitious plan is to have 1 million houses every year.
There's been no clear indication of what the deficit really is.
We said we could raise this money from Kenya.
Yes, because it's a continuous taxation.
So if we can be able to raise this money from Kenya, so we should not accept any support from outside.
Because the question is, why then do we need a loan that will still repay when we're still taxing our own people to build the same houses? Because this does not directly translate to the relief to the Mwananchi. There'll be no conversation that because we access this loan now, so the housing levy will be reduced for now.
That is true. That is very true. But also remember, there's an ambition. If you look at the plan, the Kenya Kwanza Manifesto, the plan is to have 1 million houses every single year. So if we were to achieve that target, we have to have support from all angles. We have to generate revenues internally. We also have to get support from our development partners. So it is very key, if we are able to get it from a 360-degree view, to fill these ambitious targets. So this is very progressive on the deals that have been taking place here.
Okay, Biko.
Trevor, I think as young people, we need to be honest with ourselves first and foremost. I disagree with him vehemently, because one, allow me to touch on the housing issue. We don't need US to give us money to do the housing, because even the money we've raised currently, we're not using it. The government is actually investing that money into treasury bills and bonds. So the question is, why are you collecting money from people by force to go invest it into treasury bills and bonds, and who is the beneficiary for that interest? So we do not have the structures for the housing levy to actually be utilized on the ground. Number two, Kenya's economy, we cannot be able to produce 1 million houses. That is impossible. We need to be very, very honest with what our capacity is. But looking overall over the visit and the element of taxation, as I've said before, the biggest issue, the biggest question that we should be asking is, how is Kenya benefiting from this? We've seen the U.S. interest being taken care of. The U.S., in terms of geopolitics, the U.S. has basically used Kenya to position itself in the Horn of Africa, East Africa aspect. As Philip said, our president is a master of doublespeak. When he's in Africa, he dons on countersuits and speaks about Pan-Africanism very well. But the moment he leaves the African space and goes to the US and other countries, puts on, a very beautiful suit. So our president is a double-speak person. And it becomes, when you have such a leader, it becomes very difficult to actually tell which direction we're actually heading to. If you look at our relationship as a country with other African countries, it's very bad. For the first time in our history, we're not relating very well with other African partners. We've seen what's been happening between us and Uganda. It's taken a lot of many players to bring us back on the table with Uganda to discuss. Look at how South Africans view us. Look at how Nigerians...
But the president himself was here and they discussed and agreed on certain trade deals that were stalled for the longest time.
I'm privy to what happened behind the scenes. For Museveni to come here and for him to meet the president and sign the deal, it's because we had fallen apart. Many African presidents are actually calling us doublespeak because we say this on African stage, then we say that on international level. Why do we need to go and beg money from World Bank? If we can only be able to fix governance in Africa, fix the element of corruption, we don't need anyone to give us money. When we talk about borrowing money from a single digit to a double digit in terms of interest, as an African, I'm asking myself, do I not have the capacity to build my own institutions that can lend money across Africa? When you look at how US invests money, for example, one of the reasons why American money never goes to waste, and even all this money is going to be accounted for, is because most of this money is pension from American police and other civil servants. So they're investing their money in Africa. It's working for them. They will get interest. What about us as Africans putting up our own institutions, using our own pension funds to do these projects? I believe we have the capacity to achieve this. What we lack...
Wouldn't that lead to increased taxation?
No.
Where do you get the money from?
Currently, if we were to look at our pension laws and how pension funds invest in Kenya or across Africa, we can be able to have a reform aspect and ensure that money in the pension funds can actually be used to fund this project. The circle movement in Africa is actually very big. What we lack is prudent management. What we lack is proper corporate governance. And for me, I believe the problem we have is incompetent leadership, corrupt civil servants, and a lot of wastage. How much have we used? We have 917 million in the US, Kenya, to strengthen the police service. This trip of 4 days is gobbling up 500 million. How much can that 500 million do for our people, for our teachers? So for us, what we should be having as a discussion is, what kind of leadership do we have? Is it the right leadership to take Kenya and Africa ahead, or is it going to put us in more debt?
Okay. CPM, you're the numbers guy, and I like that you stay away from the political side of it. But are we able to really restructure in such a way that we can be self-reliant? Is that even possible when you look at the numbers?
Absolutely. Very difficult. And I think when you look at very many countries across the world, not just in Africa or the developing countries, I mean, whether you're looking at the US, Japan and all that, they all have debt. Every country, almost every, maybe we might have a few exceptions, but they all have debt. I think the main question is our utilization of the debt that we get. And I think in this country, what we have done in the past, and I'm sure we might be benefiting from this, is that we took a lot of debt to work on our infrastructure. We have a lot of loads that have been put up by maybe the previous regime. And that was mainly financed through debt. And that is how we have found ourselves to be in the situation that we are in, that we have taken a lot of debt, and we've had the IMF, the IMF had to come through to rescue us from defaulting, the Euro board. Basically, maybe we are talking of a debt relief situation. Maybe they would actually consider that to have been one. We were almost headed to where Ghana and Zambia went to in terms of defaulting. So they came in hard and they refinanced part of that, and just to ensure that we do not default. So debt per se, I would say, a bad thing. Even at an individual level, I know most people will still take debt. The key issue is accountability. Is the government able to account for the money that we are getting as debt? In terms of, if we take debt and we say we are putting up this plant, or we are probably developing an industrial zone, can we actually see the results of that then coming later at a certain point? If we are looking at the major infrastructure projects, and this is the reality we are looking at, the capacity, because when I look at the current debt levels, we are about 9 trillion. 9 trillion. Now we are getting to 10 trillion. And these are very huge debt that we are carrying. We don't have a lot of capacity to finance huge infrastructural projects. The only way out is going to the PPP, where the private players will come in, they will finance these projects, and they will get into an arrangement where they will recoup their investments. The key thing, and I think I will repeat this, is that the government must ensure that we do not commit to provide certain guarantees that will actually maybe not reflect in this debt, but in the event that there's a there's a deficit, we have to finance. So how these are crafted will be important, but I think we also have to make sure that, because otherwise a country is only financed through two main sources of income, tax or debt. Literally, grants, I think as a country we are getting very minimal when you look at the grants we are getting, because we are now considered to be not a low-income country, so we are not getting a lot of grants. So we either get a lot of taxes, and I think Kenyans are feeling the pain, and why we are discussing this, or the debt. So there has to be a balance, and I think proper management and accountability is key in ensuring that Kenyans appreciate what is being done out there in terms of the government going to discuss with other partners on how to support us.
Are we overtaxed from the numbers perspective?
Very interesting, Trevor, and I think a very interesting question. Are we overtaxed? Maybe it will depend with how you look at it. There's no doubt that over the past, last year and this year, we have seen an aggressive approach in terms of new taxes coming into force or being proposed. This was not the case in the probably in the previous regime. Now, the question is, when you look at the various taxes that are being introduced, maybe the question we need to ask ourselves, is it the right time to introduce these taxes? And I think we will probably get into the taxes such as the motor vehicle tax that is being proposed. The question is it the right time to do this, or can we wait a little bit longer until probably we have developed a proper public transport system, after which you can say, if then you opt to still use your private car, then you should be able to pay this tax that then facilitates you to move with your private car. I think the timing is the issue here, and the multiplicity of taxes. And in addition to the main conventional taxes, corporate income tax, VAT, we have very many other levies. We are talking of the affordable housing levy. And I was analyzing just the number of levies that we have in this country, and there are many. You start with the import declaration fee. You look at the railway development levy. You are coming in last year, we have the affordable housing levy. We have the export and export promotion levy. We are now proposing a motor vehicle circulation levy. We are proposing an eco levy. I think we are getting to a situation where probably it's becoming difficult to work around the taxes, and we are now getting to the direction of levies. But we are forgetting that these levies will still feed into the cost of the goods that are being produced, which might affect the competitiveness of goods that are being exported out of this country. So looking at an overall level and ensuring that we harmonize, that we do not get into, very many levies that are, not working towards the goal that we are working towards, progress, let's say, promoting manufacturing that Biko is talking about. We really need to look at this, and the timing is key. We really cannot afford to be increasing taxes every other year.
Wanjika, we overtaxed. Let's get into the taxation space now, even in relation to the Finance Bill 2024.
I'm thinking what is happening is that we have a smaller tax base, and what the president's looking at is to expand it so that the burden isn't just carried by a certain particular group of people.
There are those who argue the opposite, that instead of expanding the tax base, the people who are the 20% who are financing 80% of the budget are being taxed more. Because it is a fact that the 20% of the people are financing 80% of this.
Yes. And for me, I always look at it in a positive way, expanding the tax base, because it makes people more cognizant of decisions that they make when they choose leaders. At the end of the day, that person who comes to ask for your vote, what does he tell you? Is that a person who can be able to go on the floor of parliament and coherently represent you? Because at the end of the day, before people on the ground will just come and listen to the person who speaks their language, that, you know. But for me, if I come, I'm speaking your language, yes, but I'm also very witty. I understand what's happening in the country. I'm able to coherently give you and help you understand the budget cycle, ensure that I'm explaining to you why it's so important for you to attend public participation at county level. Like for example, the other time when we attended public participation in my county, the report that was given back was that there was no public participation. Actually, no one attended public participation. But even if you're telling people you have to go for public participation, they have to also understand that you have to follow up what report was given back. So now it's a push and pull between us and county government. So for me, as we continue to increase the tax base, for me it makes us more responsible citizens, active, and it makes you. Every day you want to be in the business of government. What are they saying? If I'm paying this tax, does it create evidence of the kind of work, the money I'm giving back to the government? Yeah. So for us, it's pushing us to become more responsible citizens. And for us, what we want to see even as Kenyans, as young people, is to see equitable economies. And that's what we are pushing for.
So do you think we overtaxed or not?
Yes, I think we overtaxed because it's a smaller base.
Philip?
Well, for me to answer that question, I will maybe just bring in three things, and that is the three functions of taxation. Number one, you have revenue collection, which informs representation, because you collect revenue, you're paying your representatives, and that representation is doing a few things. Number two, there is redistribution, in the sense that you have certain quarters of the population that are not at a place where they can access certain services, they can access certain goods at certain prices, and therefore you collect tax and make sure that you have sort of equity across the society. And number three, it is regulation or repricing. There is a regulatory aspect to it, and that deals with how government systems across the world are able to inform how the private sector operates. So you can decide to give exemptions in a particular area to spur economic growth or certain sectors of the economy. So for me, to say whether we are overtaxed or not is to look at those three functions. And those three functions are, they have the base in how we spend our taxes. So we could have 30% taxation. I mean, you have countries like Denmark. Denmark has, I think, the highest taxes in the world. But those taxes have a correlative effect on the services they receive. You pay this much tax, you do not pay fees in school. You pay this much tax, but you do not pay, any amounts of money in hospital. So we are overly taxed only to the extent that our taxes do not achieve the effect of taxation. We have certain taxes, and Robert has mentioned the levies that we are now levying on consumption, because I think we have a dual system where we are taxing income and also taxing consumption. Some jurisdictions only tax consumption. We are taxing income, and we are also taxing consumption. That is why I think now the VAT is, we have proposals to increase VAT. So if our taxes were being spent on what they are supposed to, then we should not be in this position. If, for example, the tax we pay NHIF, and I think all salaried employees pay NHIF, now it will be moving to SHIF, and we are told this is a brand new thing, revolutionary, which I don't agree with. But if we are paying NHIF, then we must see a direct effect in our hospitals, on the healthcare system. If we are paying the road levy, and I think some of us who have moved around, if you have moved around in Nairobi, you'd see a small pickup somewhere on a road. There's a sign reading your road levy. at work. And after they have left, you see sort of pimples and small heels on the road because they are saying they are recarpeting, but I mean we know what they leave in the wake of that road levy at work. So yes, taxation is important, but as we are taxing, let's make sure that that tax is working for mwananchi. Okay. When we're talking about debt, and let me just mention this as I close on that point, those of us who were very critical of Uhuru's government were of the view that for us to get out of this pit, there were very tough measures that we would take. And I agree with Robert that even with these tough measures, if you are a humane government, you can decide to have incremental, tough measures so that you are not increasing VAT by 10%, for example, in 1 year, or you do not have taxes increased by 20% in 1 year, or as President Ruto is saying, increasing it by 22% by the time he's leaving office. So there is a humane aspect to taxation. If you go by the President's Council of bookkeepers, they go by another name officially, but I refer to them as bookkeepers because they are there to make sure that we are keeping good books. Our
you
books
mean the economic advisors? Yes,
that is the name they go by. But they're there to make sure that the IMF is pleased, the World Bank is pleased, that we can pay our loans and they can give us more. But if you go by their advice, you lose out on the humane bit. Robert will tell you that there's a point where you can be very technical about finance and economics that you lose out on the people. So we can go that direction. But this is to the Kenya Kwanza government. If you go that direction, then you risk losing the people. While it may be of no consequence to some of the people in government, losing the people is dangerous, not just to those in government, but to the health of the society.
Okay. Nathaniel, there's something in economics called the Laffer curve. Is the inverse relationship between tax collection and revenue collection at the end of it all. It means you get to a point where you increase so much taxes that the revenue you collect is actually less. It achieves the negative impact on it. Are we at that tipping point? That we're raising too many taxes, that at the end of it all now, the revenue collection will actually be less?
So first of all, Trevor, that's a very fundamental question. I sometimes don't envy the president because he got a job that is very difficult. First of all, we have a 2010 constitution that is very expensive to implement. If you look at the structures within the 2010 constitution, for example, the number of constitutional commissions there, the number of counties that we have, 47, it is a heavy constitution that has placed a lot of responsibility on the taxpayer. So the president has to make very balanced decisions in terms of, are we continuing to borrow more money to invest in financing the constitution and public services, or we need to aggressively mobilize revenues internally from the Kenyan people to finance our own country. So it's a very difficult decision. Remember, when the president came in, he accumulated a lot of debts that were from the other regimes. And you know the principle of government is that government is a continuous enterprise. You will never say that because the former president borrowed money, I don't have to pay. So the president has been making very difficult, sometimes not popular decision that Philip is trying to say the humane part of it. A leader has to lead the people not where they want to be, but where the people ought to be. That means you have to make the right decisions. So if you look at what is happening, for example, you have to finance many of the administrative units that are very expensive. You have to finance public services, health, education, and all these others. At the same time, you have to repay or meet our debt obligations. And if you look at the revenues that we have, they are not meeting it. They are not meeting all these obligations. Secondly, any good leader must leave an inheritance for their children. You cannot come on earth and then you are a father, you have children, you don't want to leave them any inheritance. We can never be successful as a nation if we are not thinking about the next generation. For example, we have to create this way. We have to get to a stage where we have to, at some point, loan other countries money from our own resources. So if you look at the taxes that are being introduced, some of them do not have adequate public participation, or rather there is lack of government communication on what these taxes constitute, but some of them are very progressive. You've had mentioned figures here from other countries. If you go to countries like Norway, these are countries that have been able to invest in their own sovereign wealth funds, meaning they have been able to invest money for the next generation. Trevor, let nobody lie to you that you will be able to finance our own development through the monies coming from other people. That one, there is no free lunch in the development space. So we have to make tough decisions on what we want to do in terms of financing our own budgets. Okay. The only thing the government has to do, and this is a call that we have to make as a people, is that they have to bridge the trust deficit in terms of the accountability between the amounts of money that are collected, and they have to demonstrate that those taxes are being put into good use. Okay. There has to be result in that effect. So this is a call that we have to make to the leadership.
Biko, how do we draw the balance between development and taxation? And now that you've seen the Finance Bill 2024, you can relate it to that. Because the government says that out of that, the levies that they've introduced, they're looking to bridge and get about 306 billion shillings.
First and foremost, I don't think the government will be able to achieve its target, because at the end of the day, as I've said before, Kenya is a country that's been focusing on only one sector, the service sector. And the services sector is not sustainable enough to keep taxing the way they're taxing. So one, yes, we are overtaxed, because if you look at out of every 100 shillings you earn, 67% of that is going to taxation. So the other 33 you're left with, you have to look for private healthcare, private education, private transport. So there's too much wastage in government. Every day we're seeing requests for house renovations, new cars, seafood. At the end of the day, you're left wondering, are our taxes actually going to use for us? And the one thing I've noticed that when Kenyans are having the discussion about taxation, we look at the proposed, like now we're looking at the finance bill, but we're not looking at the budget side. How is this money actually going to be used? Where is this money going to? And this is where we actually need to interrogate, because if people are to look at how the money is being spent, you'll realize that certain constituencies and certain sectors of the economy are receiving more money than others. So we are putting our attention to one aspect and forgetting the other element, which is actually very crucial. So for me, I think we're beating around the bush. We need to call it what it is. There's a lot of wastage. Even the president and his economic advisors have admitted there's a lot of wastage. Number two, we don't have a wide tax base to be able to keep affording these taxes, because now the current regime, what it's going to do is it's going to create jobs for people who earn very little money. You know, like the president keeps saying, the housing levy will create 1 million jobs. How much are these young people going to make for them to be taxed? They're going to make maybe 10 to 15,000 shillings. How much is that in terms of taxation? So in as much as you're going to create smaller informal jobs, they're not going to be sufficient enough to enable the government to be able to meet the target they intended to. And thirdly, if you look at the current finance proposed bill, it's hitting the young people directly. Many young people don't have jobs, so many of them have become very innovative and they've gone online to look for the jobs. If you look at the proposed bill, we're looking at increasing taxation on mobile transactions, increasing taxation on content creation, and this basically hits the young people. And if they keep doing that, then you're going to have young people who can't be able to make a living, who are not employed. Crime rate is going to go up. So the ripple effect of this finance bill is not going to be good for the government. And this is why I keep telling young people, especially my friend here, that it is time for us to have an honest conversation about our leadership. If we got people in leadership to work, if the EACC can be able to do its work and prosecute every single person who's a thief, like I believe all the other former governors need to be in jail, because I don't think our 2010 constitution is expensive to implement. No. The drafters of that constitution understood how to make it work. The problem we're having is everyone is eating. And the junior officers and mid-level managers believe that as long as my bosses are eating and are not being caught, even me, I will eat. So we have that mentality of, it's my time to eat, I'm not going to serve the public. And that is a problem. I don't think it's prudent to have any other conversation until we deal with the element of corruption. And two, as a country, we're not going to go anywhere until we address agriculture, production, and manufacturing.
Okay. Robert, how do we balance this? You know, that's the main question here.
Absolutely, and I think it's a difficult endeavor for any government. Granted, we've had previous administrations, they've struggled or they've attempted to work on this. I think one of the key things is that as we need to have taxes to pay our debt. And I was looking at what Biko is saying is this country is very heavy on services. And when I look at the statistics that have been issued by through the economic survey, services contributed 55.4% of our GDP. That's more than half our GDP. So we are saying our GDP is largely from the service sector. The industry where the manufacturing would be contributed just 16.8%, while the agricultural sector contributed 21.8%. So as you can see, this country, we have, let's say, a unique economy. When I compare this with some of the economies in this continent that are big, look at Nigeria, look at South Africa. Most of them, actually the two of them, they have a huge or substantial contribution from the extractive sector. This is the oil, petroleum, minerals, and all that. We don't have that in Kenya. I mean, other than what I've seen in Kwale, where we're doing a bit of mining, we have very minimal taxes coming in through that side. So Kenya, we have to ensure that, one, we protect the contribution that we are getting from the service sector. Now, we are seeing many taxes that are being proposed on this sector. The financial sector, there's a target to impose VAT on certain financial services. There's a target to impose VAT on certain insurance services. So the question that begs is, have we evaluated the impact of this on the overall, performance of these sectors? Because if we do then impose taxes, which will lead to a decline in terms of the performance of these sectors, we then kill the, where we are getting most of our taxes, we are killing these sectors. So as we work in terms of ensuring that the entire economy contributes into the tax kitty, we need to protect the one sector that gives a lot of revenue as we seek to grow the industry sector. And when I look at the employment numbers, as a matter of fact, the biggest contributor to our the employment numbers that were given for last year was manufacturing, 340,000 people. Agriculture follows with 302,000 people, and then wholesale follows with 270. So as much as we are saying, from a GDP perspective, the industry contributes a smaller percentage from the number of people who are working, the casual laborers, and the very many, because in terms of the linkages within the manufacturing and the agricultural sector, there are very many forward and, farmers, then you get to the industry, then you get to the suppliers and all that. So there are so many people involved in that supply chain that you need to ensure that we protect and we grow this industry to ensure that then the employment numbers, and that's where the majority of the youth are looking to get jobs, are able to be absorbed by these key industries.
Okay. There are some leaders who are speaking during the annual ISPAC seminar, that is the Institute of Certified Public Accountants seminar in Mombasa, and they disagreed on this issue around financing. But let's listen to what they had to say. And also the counties, which has been mentioned by Biko here. The governor, FCPA, Fernandez Baraza, was there, and they mentioned some of their issues as well. Let's listen to what they had to say.
I've been receiving very little money to finance activities in the counties. This is where the functions which have been devolved, we don't have the requisite resources to follow functions, to an extent that most of the time projects are initiated but they're not completed on time because of inadequate allocation.
Particularly when you go into the rural counties where we do not have a lot of business, you find that you are dealing with the people who are basically very poor, and the revenue streams there are very, very limited, unlike counties that are urbanized or urban counties. So there is a whole reason to look at the revenue collection. And again, we have to look at which streams do we emphasize on.
The allegation about expenditures on renovation of State House and all those other expenditures are approved by National Assembly. Do we have a division? Do we have them raise and say, we oppose this budget? It never happens. And so, if we are going to have a really honest conversation, can we oppose the budget as much as we're opposing the revenue collection side of it? That way, all these tax measures that are being proposed don't have to be there. I told you, that the finance bill of 2024 is raising 302 billion shillings. If we can cut that from the budget, we don't need to have any additional tax measures. Is anyone willing to have that conversation?
And that's a fundamental question Kimani Kuria is posing, Wanjiru, because Wanjiku, is anyone willing to have their budget cut? Because he's saying that, yes, they're increasing the budget, but we're increasing taxation up to 306 billion, that is the target. If you look at the expenditure part of it, nobody will agree that their budget needs to cut. So the issue is, do we have a revenue issue or an expenditure problem? And where does this money come from?
You know, that's a very great question, because where I work, when we get the memo about budget cuts, all of us are exacerbated. You know, you don't feel good about it. And because at the end of the day, it affects programming, it affects a lot of things. So it's being between a hard place and a rock, really, because at the end of the day, you don't want to be overly taxed. At the end of the day, you don't want your budget to be slashed. Your budget to be slashed. But again, listening to the discussion that was ongoing, and even right now, we've really not evaded talking about even counties at the county level, because a lot of functions have also been devolved. Yeah. And counties also have to really put in their bit.
But you've had the governors, they are saying that they don't get money for the functions that have been devolved.
For example, in my county, it's been 3 weeks before with revenue not being collected. You see, we have to go back to our counties and hold our governors accountable.
But it's also been 3 months before they've got an allocation from the national government. In fact, workers in the counties have not been paid for 3 months.
And it's good that governors are also doing their part, but also us as active citizens, we're doing our part. As our governor, you're collecting revenue. This is helping us to grow our county. At the end of the day, we are all playing our roles, and that's how it has to be, that we hold accountable to institutions that we depend on. So for us, overall for me, I'll say we have progressive tax, but you see with the finance bill, there are some levies that are really counterproductive, like the eco levy. You see, and our president is a key champion in Africa about, climate action. So you see it's counterproductive what he's saying. You look at bread being taxed. Again, progressive tax is here to reduce inequalities. But then again, you look at bread being taxed again, this is also counterproductive. So we have to also be in tandem with what and ensure that our budgets are the finance bill is really in alignment with what really is the rule of law and what the Constitution really supports the rights of Kenyans at the end of the day.
And Philip, this is a fundamental question that Kimani Kuria was raising, the Molo MP and also the Chair of Finance, that nobody is willing to have their budget cut. So then where do you get the money from?
Those statements would be true if they were not coming from Kimani Kuria. Because Kimani Kuria is a member of parliament. These are people we have paid to give us solutions at that level. So when he's telling us about budget cuts, you look at Parliament's budgets. I was just looking at the budget estimates for 2024-25, and you look at the expenditure. That I don't think there's any Parliament in this world that expends the kind of resources our Parliament expends for the number of people who are elected in Parliament. So if we are beginning with budget cuts, Parliament should be telling us they are ready. They are ready to take budget cuts. He should not be asking us if we are willing. But number two, the hallmark of leadership is dealing in hope and reality. So a leader is a dealer in hope and reality. Number one, you're giving the people hope. You're telling them that, we are in this pit, we have these problems, but we can get solutions. We can get out of this. But you must also present the realities. And the reality that the Kenya Kwanza government did not present to the people is what we ought to have done to get ourselves out. So if you're presenting the people with the realities and telling them this is a tough place, these are the options we have, we will have to cut expenditure, because cutting expenditure means that some people will lose jobs, definitely. Because with the kind of bloated government we have, and we have to be very real with some of these issues, we have a bloated government. The architecture of the Constitution is not expensive, in my view. If you're told that we are going for a meeting and all of us need to wear suits, if you go and buy a 200,000 shilling suit, that is up to you. You can't come and tell us, suits are very expensive these days. I mean, there are suits that are worth 5,000 shillings. Why didn't you get the 5,000 shilling suits? So we have decided to make the Constitution of Kenya 2010 expensive. That is up to us. So one of the things and we needed to be very radical about this. President Ruto came in with a lot of goodwill in the sense that he was coming in against a system that was being phased out. He was coming in with, quote-unquote, fresh people, though we know they are not fresh. He had the opportunity to effect some radical changes, beginning with deflating the government structures. We have now resorted to, agreeing with the IMF that we need to close down some parastatals. The IMF has to tell us that you need to, merge and close down certain parastatals. Why do we have to wait for the IMF to tell us these things? Why do we have to wait for some of these conditions that come with the loans for us to, downsize? Parliament, for example, you look at the allowances. We still have contentions about them receiving a sitting allowance. You pay people to go and sit in a house. You're paying them a salary and then they will pay themselves a sitting allowance. It is absurd. One of the things that perhaps Kenyans need to understand, when you see, for example, the 1 kilometer presidential motorcade, that has cost implications. It is you who is funding that 1 kilometer presidential motorcade. Today, cabinet secretaries can't go to the nearest county from Nairobi without hiring a chopper. Why? That is taxpayers' money. You attend certain meetings, and this I've also seen with governors. Governors attend a funeral, and as the governor comes in, his chair is brought in. It has been transported from wherever. The lectern that he will speak from has also been transported with him. Who do you think is funding this kind of largesse? It is the taxpayer. When you... And that chair issue seems like a small matter, but if you go to these public functions, cabinet secretaries, certain high-profile individuals, the chairs they sit on have to move with them from Nairobi. So if they are going to Nakuru, kuna gari specifically assigned for the chair, specifically assigned for the lectern, and you can imagine what that portends for the kind of security that moves with these individuals.
Yeah.
So if we are talking about expenditure and extravagance, in my view, the first people who should reduce the expenditure is Parliament. Okay. But we must also be real as Kenyans that when we are excited about politicians coming with entourages, we're the ones who are facilitating. County governments cannot say they do not have enough money. I agree that funds need to be dispersed timely. That is an issue. That, funds or functions need to follow funds and vice versa. That is true. But the kind of, pilferage that we are seeing in counties, you have some county governors today who are on the EACC radar, and the EACC has mentioned this, counties that have, looted close to 5 billion. Mm-hmm. We are just on the second year of this regime in counties. Somebody has already squandered 5 billion in a county. How much development can 5 million do? Quite a lot, by the way. In Kibaki's regime, the first years of Kibaki's regime, we remember that former Prime Minister Raila Odinga was Minister for Roads and Public Works. If you went to the different offices of Roads and Public Works, you would see machinery that later, wasted away. The Ministry of Roads and Public Works was doing, their own projects. So if it was a road repair, the Ministry of Roads and Public Works was doing it. They had employed engineers, they had employed people to do the job. And then we came up with a brilliant idea called, public procurement, which again, has had very good benefits. But it also had the import of, increasing that extravagance. So you can hire people, have them on a salary to do the job, but you'd rather get a consultant to do the job or get a company that would inflate the cost of that project. And that is what we have. The Kenya Kwanza government is a government by consultancy. We elected them to get into office, they got into office, and then they hired consultants to do what we elected them to do.
Okay.
So we really have to be serious about how we are engaging on these issues. We are addressing the right solutions for the wrong problems. The wrong solutions, we are, prescribing the wrong or the right solution.
Okay, let me see what you're saying online. There's a lot of feedback coming through. Let's read that and then I'll come to all of you for closing remarks, just about 2 minutes each. And let's bring that up on screen at Trevor Mbidi at Citizen TV Kenya. Use the hashtag Daybreak. Let's see what you're saying. And that's Clement. Yes, Clement says the new tax proposals are self-sabotaging. Proposed tax levy on vehicles will create a racket for police to collect more bribes. Open the debt books. What did these debts finance that cannot pay for itself? Okay? See what else you're saying. Team says Kenya is so funny. High taxes, high debts, expensive education, expensive healthcare, poor infrastructure, and low chances for survival for young people. The only men standing are corruption and lavish life for government officials. Okay. Nixon says the more youth begin to recognize that they have a voice, the more change that is possible, like influencing tax justice agenda in Kenya. Okay. Remy says there is a dire and very urgent need to involve the youth and other special interest groups in the forging of a fairer and more just tax system. The youth need to build their capacity on matters around tax and tax justice. Okay. But Michael says the heavy taxes proposed and some that are currently operational from Finance Bill 2023 to 2024 are and will definitely punish more the youth because they are the ones who have started businesses or are planning to start one. These taxes are demotivating, I believe that's what you said. Okay? Sawe says the government lacks incentives for youth-driven ventures to thrive, often offering raw or short-term deals that hinder growth. The youth need a tax holiday to establish themselves. They must unite and speak out against punitive taxes targeting them or perish. Okay? Godi Baraza says the Kenya Kwanza government has deliberately made tax matters so complex for the youth to decipher. This is a strategy by government aimed at getting more mysterious taxes from citizens without their knowledge. Okay? Bobotino Wino says majority of youth doesn't have a role to influence or informed about taxes because they are jobless and money they get from their sources of income are hands to eat. Okay? Gabi says William Ruto's, I believe that's what you wanted to say, William Ruto's visit to the US is solely dedicated to fostering development in Kenya. Collaborating with digital and Google partners, his goal is to elevate Kenya's global investments, propelling the nation to new heights of progress and prosperity. Frank says executive and legislature do not have any proper plans for youth-based initiatives that can spur economic growth. All they have are heavy taxes that scare away potential employers from the market. Instead of increasing the tax base, it's shrinking under their watch. Remy says there's a dire and very urgent need to involve the young and other special interest groups in the forging of a fairer and more just tax system. The youth need to build their capacity on matters around tax and tax justice. And that is exactly where we are ending this conversation with the closing remarks from Nathaniel. I'll start with you. What then is the role of the young people when it comes to advocating for better governance, better taxation structures, and generally a better nation for themselves?
So thank you, Trevor. The young people, we have to rise up and take up especially positions of leadership in this country and positions of influence where we can be able to positively impact on the things that are very dear to Kenyans and especially ourselves. Secondly, I wanted to comment on the quality of representation that we have in this country. I'm one of those Kenyans who is greatly disappointed by the quality of our parliament. You cannot have the president telling you that you have the ability to summon the cabinet secretaries or any minister to parliament to answer questions on accountability. Then when you have that opportunity, you spare that opportunity to get the public having the confidence on the leadership that we have. So we need to address the question of representation and the quality of parliament. And this goes back to the electorate. The electorate need to elect quality leadership, because if you cannot elect a good leader, what do you expect in terms of services from that leader? So I would also wish to propose that, we've seen the alternatives to what is making life expensive in our budget. It is basically the issue of the tender system. So perhaps maybe it's time we start exploring to abolish the tender system, for example, because if it is inflating simple things like buying pens, flowers, or we know the cost of a newspaper is 60 shillings, for example, this newspaper. But if you're giving out a tender, somebody is supplying at an inflated cost, perhaps we need to consider the alternatives in terms of building state capacity to procure some of the things directly. If, for example, the issue of public works, if the state can build its own capacity to do roads instead of doing tenders, then progressively we can be able to do away with the tender system, for instance. I would also wish to comment on the issue of a balanced budget. You've seen what the Chair of Finance is asking us to do in terms of the budget. That's why I was speaking about the quality of parliament. We don't expect Kimani Kuria to throw the question to us when they know that he has the premium platform of being able to rally members of parliament to reject some of the budget proposals that are coming from their colleague in parliament, for example. So, Trevor, I will simply say, as leaders, we must be able to be reliable watchdogs of our own principles.
Okay. Steve?
First and foremost, I would like to say that on the issue of debt, we actually need to audit the actual numbers in terms of how much we owe our partners and other creditors. The control of budget is actually on record saying that they do not have proper records on how much we owe. We've seen a lot of individuals talking about how much money we owe. So I think, one, auditing the true aspect of debt is actually very important. Number two, it is very disappointing to hear the Chair of Finance saying that the conversation about reducing budget needs to be with us. It's the role of Parliament to dictate how much money needs to go where. It's the role of Parliament to say this ministry will reduce the budget by this number. So the quality of our leaders is actually very wanting, and this I lay the blame on all the voters. But of importance is that the young people have a voice. So my closing remark will be, if you're a young person and you have a phone, your voice will matter if you just go online and give your view. Whether someone reads it or not, give your views, people will listen. And the more we keep talking about taxes, the more we keep asking questions around taxes, the more we keep demanding accountability on how our leaders are spending money. I don't understand why we need to keep renovating government official houses every other budget year. We need to keep buying cars every other budget year, when this money can go into medication, education institutions, and hiring of doctors. So I think the 2010 Constitution gives us the mandate to hold these people accountable. And I think that's where we've reached. I'm urging every young person to say something, have a voice. You have the voice. Don't wait for anyone to come and tell you, or we're calling you for a forum for you to come and give us your views. Social media gives us the opportunity to actually be able to speak about this.
Okay. Sylvia Maina?
Yeah, thank you very much for this chance. So I think when I look at the youth, the majority of the youth in this country, most of them are actually in the informal sector. A vast majority, they are in self-employment. They are either doing some small business in the agri-business arena, they are doing retail, they are doing trade in terms of import and export. And I think what we need, one, is just to support and ensure that they have the income, because the real reason why the youth are feeling the impact of taxes, it's more heavier to them because their level of income is lower compared to the older generation, who might be able to absorb more in terms of the new taxes. So one, we need to build capacity in terms of enabling them to make more money, to be able to absorb the impact of the indirect taxes, because we are very heavy now in direct taxes that then can enable them to absorb this. The other thing that I think indirectly would support the youth is implementing and ensuring that, for instance, the healthcare sector. A lot of the youth, and I know my friends and all that, they support the elderly. And from a healthcare perspective, I've seen people supporting a lot of people in the rural area, their parents, their relatives, and all that. So if, for instance, you're able to ensure that there's access to healthcare, that they do not have to go out of pocket to pay for the healthcare, then you actually are alleviating indirectly one of the burdens they have to deal with. So indirectly, if we impose taxes that they don't have to pay these other costs, then probably the burden goes down a bit. So I think there's a whole some sort of thing that need to be done to ensure that directly and indirectly the youth feel actually supported in ensuring that they participate fully in the economy.
Okay, Wanjiru?
I'm grateful for this discussion today, Trevor. And for me, my closing remark would be, young generation, as young people, we are key stakeholders in this country. But sadly and unfortunately, we are not dependable. We have to become dependable. Because when decisions are being made, even when parliamentarians are making decisions, they say, but the youth voters bloc, you can't depend on it. So we don't matter when it comes to resource distribution in this country, and that's where we ought to anchor ourselves in. Even further, can we break this cycle? There's a cycle in this country that young people we love handouts because it's easy. You can call a young person to say, hey, can you go do this job on digital spaces? They won't show up. Or they'll say, oh, I don't have bundle. You buy the bundle, they don't even do the job. But they'll be the first person to call you and say, I don't have food, send me money. So can we break this cycle of handouts? And it always comes up during elections. We want the person who's giving you money, that's the person you're going to vote in, because we benefit from this cycle. So can we be the cycle breakers? Okay. Can we actually now begin voting meritorious leaders to parliament? Because these are the people who are going to actually really represent the needs and concerns of young people. Above all, for me, I want to urge the Cabinet Secretary of Public Service, my former party leader, Moses Kuria. The government, and I've heard him speak about this, the government institution has an older population. We will want to see you phase it out. We want to see more young people get into these spaces. And we appreciate that the older generation have institutional memory, but find a way on how to face them slowly so that young people can come in. And when young people come in, they begin owning this country. They begin owning the government. And with that, then we are going to be able to see difference, because patriotism might start coming up, because now you're responsible for serving other Kenyans. You're making decisions on behalf of fellow young people. So I think that way will bring sustainability in terms of honoring this country, honoring the Constitution, stopping pilferage and corruption that exist, and let's redefine success. Okay. Success is not going, getting your chair to public functions, but you see, older voters, that's what they recognize, but not young voters. So for us, let's redefine success. It's not having a bigger car. It's not, clubbing every night. Let's redefine success in a way that is healthy, so that as young people, we curb mental illnesses, mental health issues, so that you are able to really move forward with realistic measures of success in our country today.
Okay. Yeah. Philip?
I'll try to be brief. To the youth, if you elect looters, if you elect thugs, if you elect people of questionable character, prepare to get robbed, because that is the only result you'll get out of this. We have talked about parliament, a parliament that has been touted as a youthful parliament. This is an institution that is perhaps the most important of institutions in this country. And to expect, apodictic proposals and declarations or even functions from the National Assembly is really to expect a lot. And so for me, the youth of today in Kenya needs to be an active citizen. There is a call for public participation on this finance bill. Unfortunately, the finance bill was haphazardly drafted. The ordinary citizen cannot sit down with the finance bill and, pick out these issues. But even then, we have an opportunity to present, out of what we have had, we have an opportunity to present, number one, you can present memoranda to Parliament. Number two, you can attend, the public calls of the public sessions for public participation. But I could also challenge youth, especially in this dispensation where we have so many bills coming out of Parliament, that we can call our members of Parliament to our constituencies. Set up a meeting in your constituency, whether it is 2 meetings or 3 meetings, some constituencies can manage this. Call your member of Parliament and speak to them directly. I think the role of a citizen does not end at the ballot. We must continuously engage and put our leaders to account. We must make sure that it is our voices that they are delivering on the floor of the House. It is our voices that are getting to policy. It is our voices that are getting to legislation. So we must be active citizens.
All right. right, thank you all for making time this morning and speaking about the youth and taxes. Asante sana. We have started here with Philip Mwangale, Executive Director, Jibo Group Africa, and with Njiku Thiga, Founder, Gears for Change, CPA Robert Maina, Accountant and a member of the Public Finance and Taxation Committee at ISPAC, Steve Biko of Fuller, Policy and Governance and Research Analyst, and Nathaniel Mungare, Director, ICT Programs at the ANC. Thank you all for making time this morning, and thank you all for the massive feedback that came through. We couldn't read all of them, but we tried as much as we could. Coming up next on the decks, it's Friday, people. Bensu is here with DJ Roy T-Boy, I believe, on the decks. Yes. Enjoy your weekend, people. Bye for now. My name is Trevor Ombija.